If you clicked on this video, you're probably a nerd like me. I am one of the few Tolkien nerds who actually is watching Rings of Power, and I just did a video on Tom Bombadil and how I was a little nervous how he was going to be portrayed on the Rings of Power show. So I decided I was going to do a review of each episode of Rings of Power, and as I was doing some in-depth research on what possibly could be true about Rings of Power and what's made up and etc., once episode 4 came out, I was so excited. I felt like I was beside myself, and for other purist Tolkien fans, they probably would be mad at this whole episode because of what they brought in, but it doesn't matter. This was so fun to watch. We were all anticipating when Tom Bombadil would show up. He wasn't perfect to me, but he exceeded my expectations. But not only did they bring Tom Bombadil in, we were given Old Man Willow. We got to experience the Barrow-wights in the Barrow Downs, and so we're going to discuss all of that and a couple other things that happened in this episode. Before I start, I want to preface this with the fact that even though these events don't play out in Middle-earth's history and the lineup of characters and timeline and events, it gives us Tolkien fans a glimpse of what this could look like beyond the book. And the part that actually I got a little teary-eyed is when they introduced the Entwives. The Entwives totally blew me out of the water. I had a feeling they were going to bring the Ents in towards the middle of the episode, but I was not expecting any Entwives. I totally freaked out. Okay, so our first introduction to Tom Bombadil is at the point of the show where Gandalf is separated from Nori, literally the stranger. The stranger walks up to the tree. I can't remember why. There's a lot of stuff I don't remember. And he looks at the branch and he's thinking, oh, maybe this is my staff, which was really confusing. So he goes and he picks it up, and then the tree starts like grumbling and swallows him up. And you're like, whoa, bro, what's going on? I realized what was going to happen next. And what was going to happen next is Tom was going to come over and take him out. And I thought, even though this doesn't play out the way it does in the original books, I still thought it was really fun because we did get Tom Bombadil helping somebody out of Old Man Willow. And if you read The Adventures of Tom Bombadil, which is a collection of poems, like different stories that Tolkien wrote, you are introduced into the relationship of Tom Bombadil with other creatures. When the stranger gets swallowed up, Tom Bombadil comes over, and guys, his voice is exactly how I pictured it. Is he not as merry as I would have liked? Is he a little too serious? Probably. But you know what? His voice really caught it. The only things I have critiques on is he's supposed to look like an old man, and he kind of looks like a guy in his 50s and 60s. The other experiences we're having in this scene is while the stranger is taking a bath, you can hear Goldberry humming. The stranger's like asking Tom Bombadil as he comes into the room, hey, is there another person in the room? And Tom Bombadil's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, what's going on? I don't understand why they did it like that, but maybe we'll meet Goldberry in the next episode. Hopefully. I thought that was a cute little inkling at what could happen next. After that, you know, in between different parts happening in the episode, we keep returning to the stranger and Tom Bombadil. And Tom Bombadil is revealing who he is. He's the eldest, and he's keeping it a mystery like he does, you know, with riddles and rhymes. But I love that he has his bees that he's taking care of, and he has his little lamb that and obviously he has other animals that he really cares for. I think in the next episode, we'll probably see his natural garb that he wears, and I did enjoy his interactions with the strangers. If this indeed is Gandalf, it would make sense why the writers of the show thought they could have this occurrence happen, because at the end of Return of the King, Gandalf basically tells them that he is going to leave them and let them go on their way, and he says, I'm gonna go hang out with Tom Bombadil. So here it says, but if you would know, I am turning aside soon. I am going to have a long talk with Bombadil. Such a talk as I have not had in all my time. He is a moss gatherer, and I have been a stone doomed to rolling. Ugh, impeccable. But my rolling days are ending, and now we shall have much to say to one another. So that's what he says about going to see Tom Bombadil, and I love that. I guess we'll see what happens. And then he tells the hobbits that maybe they could go see him too, but right now they gotta go take care of business. Return of the King, baby. So it would make sense why they would want this to be his beginning if he indeed is Mithrandir, who is Gandalf, if you didn't know that. Okay, so next up, they introduce the Barrow-wights in the Barrow Downs. So Galadriel and Elrond are leading a expedition to Eregion to Celebrimbor and warn him about Sauron. How this plays out is really interesting because it doesn't play out like this in the actual books. But I will talk about that in a different scene. Right now we're just talking about the really cool things that happened in this episode. So all of a sudden, Galadriel and Elrond's company, they happen upon some dead bodies, and as they're looking around, they look into this cave and you see some creepy eyes. Okay, if you watched my other YouTube video, I talked about how I'm kind of glad they didn't bring the Barrow-wights into Peter Jackson's movies. I don't know, because it's creepy, but these were not as creepy as I would have liked them to be, which is kind of ironic. In my other video, I said that I was scared of it being freaky. So forgive me. There's two things I caught in this sequence of events. One is we see the Barrow-wight's hand reaching out. I think he's trying to grab Galadriel, but you see this hand reaching out, and I suddenly thought, oh my gosh, this is the exact moment that happened to Frodo when the Barrow-wight's hand is reaching out for one of Frodo's companions. So I instantly thought, okay, they grabbed that scenario from the Fellowship of the Ring. And then Elrond states that the only way to kill the Barrow-wights is by killing them with a sword that was made from the very thing that they're made from, which does allude to why the Nazgul were able to be killed by these blades. So even though this doesn't really play out, and it is an actually sad scene because one of the elves does get killed, but it's really funny how if you have subtitles on, in the first episode they say there was some chomping going on when Sauron was eating that woman, and then in this episode they do the same thing with the Barrow-wight eating the elf, and in the subtitles it says chomping. So I thought that was really gross, but kind of clever. So the Barrow-wight scene was pretty cool. I don't know if they're gonna play more with that. Again, I wish it was a little creepier. Next up, we have Arondir, Isildur, and Estrid. Is that her name? This is before the Entwives got lost, if all of my research isn't failing me right now. And so what we're gathering here is the grief of the trees losing some of their entings, which are the baby trees. The tree with all of the blossoms on her head, Winterbloom, the Entwife, comes over and she whacks Estrid away. And as she's about to attack Estrid again, Arondir comes over and calms her down and says, I am Arondir of the Green Wood. And if you look at his breastplate, it has like a wood emblem on it that has like the face of a tree. While I was watching, I was thinking, oh, maybe because he's of the Greenwood, he would have some sort of connection. But no, all elves love trees. Trees are super important to all elves in Middle Earth. So it's not just because he's from the Greenwood that would make sense. So why the Ents are important is the Ents protect the trees. They are like shepherds, and the Entwives are the ones who curate the seedlings and they curate gardens. Treebeard one day is like, I want to go find this one specific Entwife and visit her because he misses her. He's kind of attracted to her and he wants to go find her. So he journeys everywhere and he can't find her, and then he asks around and apparently nobody knows where they went. So at this point in the Two Towers, this is where it talks about what's happening with the Ents. And Treebeard and Pippin are having this long conversation about their history, and Pippin is wondering, why haven't you guys like procreated, basically, like why aren't there any more, baby Treebeards? So Treebeard says, but there were never many of us, and we have not increased. There have been no entings, no children. You would say, not for a terrible long count of years. You see, we lost the Entwives. How very sad, said Pippin. How was it that they all died? They did not die. I never said die. We lost them, I said. We lost them and we cannot find them. So sad. And then it says that there were songs about the hunt of the Ents for the Entwives, sung among elves and men from Mirkwood to Gondor. They cannot be quite forgotten. And then he goes into a very long thing about it. Two of the Entwives were named Fimbrethel and Wandlim. And I tried to see if any of them were named Winterbloom, but no, there's not. But yeah, Treebeard's pretty bummed out because he never got to see his Fimbrethel again, so that was kind of sad. Also, another fun part of this, the male tree that is slumped over and then wakes up is voiced by Jim Broadbent. That was super fun because I love him. And then I found out that Winterbloom, the Entwife, is voiced by Olivia Williams, who I also so love and adore. Okay, so next up we have Nori and her friend. I will find out her name. Maybe I should go look it up. Let's see. Poppy. Okay, so Nori and her friend Poppy, they've been separated by the stranger, Gandalf, whatever his name is. They've been separated by him, and they happen upon another hobbit-looking guy with some facial hair, and he's kind of confused, like, what's going on, and basically takes them to his people. And all of a sudden, we are encountering a whole other sect of hobbit, and these are the stores. Now, if you didn't know this, Smeagol, hashtag Gollum, is a store hobbit. So the stores are broader, they have more facial hair, and they are stronger and a little bit taller than the Harfoots. It's a society run by matriarchs, which I thought was super cool because, again, to all the feminists out there you go. Tolkien doesn't hate women, okay? I just think it's really funny. I just think it's funny that people harp on Tolkien not being, like, so keen towards women, but really, like, he has really cool characters, okay? So they have their time and place. So this society is run by matriarchs, and I love that the show got this right because they do have a matriarch coming in and asking all the questions and being the leader. The only thing I was confused about in this part of the show was what was going on with the fact that they were living in a desert. My thought is maybe instead of like near the Anduin up north near Mirkwood in the Misty Mountains, maybe they placed them in the Brown Lands and they just haven't gotten there yet. But in Middle Earth history, all of the hobbits originally were near the Anduin, and then Harfoots and the other ones, I forget their names, traveled west and these stores stayed. And they are a river people specifically, and they're supposed to be near the marshes. So it's kind of confusing why they're in the Brown Lands, I'm guessing, instead of in the marshes. Maybe we'll find out what's gonna happen. So yeah, it's kind of confusing, but my predictions are that maybe these stores are gonna travel north towards that marshland to the Gladden Fields. That's originally where all of the Hobbit like creatures were. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with that. Okay, so my last thing I want to talk about, what's going on with the stranger. At this point, with his conversations with Tom Bombadil, I'm kind of imagining what's going to happen in the future episodes and what we're going to find out. The stranger either could be Gandalf or Mithrandir, or he could be one of the Blue Wizards, and that's something that's surfacing the internet. Everybody's making predictions that he's one of the Blue Wizards. I have a hard time taking that in because he looks so much like Mithrandir, and he says things and kind of functions in a way that reminds me of Mithrandir. The only problem I have with that also is that Gandalf is really friendly with people in the West, so like elves and hobbits. He's all about them, and he's always traveling in between the men and the elves and the hobbits. For me, he is hanging out with the Harfoots, and that's like a repetitive pattern for Gandalf in the future when he hangs out with Bilbo and he takes him on a quest, and then he takes Frodo on a quest. And here we have Nori, and he's taking her on a quest too. So we're going to talk about the Blue Wizards. So there are 5 wizards. There's Saruman, Radagast, and Gandalf. And then there's the 2 other Blue Wizards. Originally, their names were Alatar and Palando. And Iluvatar had sent Palando to Middle-earth to scope out if Saruman was doing anything and getting mischievous. So he brought Alatar with him to help him out. But then eventually they got caught up in cultic things and magic. So that was Tolkien's original view of like what he wanted to do with those guys. But then later on in his other writings, he says that the Blue Wizards end up helping in the Second Age. What my prediction is, we are taking the concept of the original idea of Blue Wizards being sent, and I'm guessing that the guy who's in that cave is the concept of the original wizards who fell to cultic magic and evil deeds. I'm guessing that's the original thing that's going on, and then the stranger is maybe the adaptation of the wizards who help out but fail, evidently. The only wizard who actually returns to Valinor is Gandalf. He's the only one who completed his quest. So that's kind of my prediction, is he's either Mithrandir or he's a concept of the Blue Wizards helping out but failing. But again, I don't think that's true. The other idea is that the guy in the cave, the wizard, is just Saruman. That's what other people are saying. I don't particularly like the concept of the stranger because none of the wizards appear until the Third Age, until you look at Tolkien's writing, who says that the Blue Wizards help in the Second Age. So to each their own. I don't know. We'll see. Episode 1 and episode 4 have been my favorites so far. Also, I wanted to say Rondir is probably my favorite character. Okay. Let me know which episode you like. If you hate it, let me know if you loved it. if you were as surprised as me. You probably clicked on this video because you're a nerd like me. Thank you for joining me today and exploring this episode of Rings of Power, and we'll see you next time for the other episodes.